Hello and welcome to Passing Priority. My name is Mike and today we have a deck built around a new legend from Adventures in the Forgotten Realm that hungers for victory. Grazilax, Illithis Scholar is a 3-mana legendary horror, costing 1 and 2 blue. And whenever a creature we control becomes blocked, we can choose to return it to our hand, keeping it safe from dying in combat. Grazilax also says that whenever we deal combat damage to an opponent with one or more creatures, we draw a card. This will trigger once per opponent, regardless of if we hit them with one creature or 100 creatures. The deck we have today wants to take advantage of the ability to return creatures to our hand, and tries to force our opponents into difficult decisions of if letting our creatures get through for damage is worse than getting some enter the battlefield triggers. That is only how we're getting value, but this deck has a hunger to win, and in D&D, a mind flayer's diet consists of eating the brains of our captives. So we will be doing the same. Our game plan is milling our opponent's library. Let's get started. Before we talk about how we'll eat away at our opponent's library, we need to get set up for dinner, and we will start by looking at our ramp. Sol Ring is a classic commander staple, and to no surprise finds a home in this deck as well. Wayfarer's Bauble is another 1 mana value ramp piece that for the cost of 2 mana and sacrificing itself, gets us a basic land tapped onto the battlefield. Arcane Signet, Mindstone, Sky Diamond and Star Compass are our standard low mana value rocks that we love to see in our opening hand. Liquid Metal Torque is another 2 mana rock that provides us some synergy with our removal. Blue can bounce most permanents, but has trouble dealing with things like enchantments. But recently, blue has gained a few pieces of artifact removal. This helps turn those cards into any non-land permanent removal. An Unstable Obelisk is a 3 mana rock that can deal with any permanent after we've got set up and we have 8 mana to spare. That's 7 mana to activate, and the 1 mana that this could have produced. Very costly, and something we only want to do in a real pinch. We have some land-based ramp in the form of Solemn Simulacrum, which can fetch us a basic land from our deck onto the battlefield when it enters, and if it dies we draw a card. This is a card that we can try and make our opponents block it to return it to our hand to recast and get more lands. One of my favourite blue ramp cards is Dreamscape Artist, which for 3 mana, 2 of any colour and a blue, tapping itself and discarding a card, has us search our library for 2 basic lands and put them on the battlefield untapped. This makes whatever we discard functionally like a better Harrow, not having to sacrifice the land but getting all the upsides. And Myriad Landscape and Terrain Generator sit in our mana base to provide us some ramp without taking a slot away from our game plan. And with the ramp finished, let's look at our draw. Our commander does have a draw ability, but blue has access to similar but more powerful versions of this. Bind of Thassa, Coastal Piracy and Reconnaissance Mission are all enchantments that will draw us a card for each creature that deals combat damage, rather than each opponent we hit. And Deep Fathom Skulker does the same, but is a body that can trigger this effect as well. It can also allow us to pay 1 colourless and 3 mana of any colour to give a creature unblockable. While we want to have our creatures blocked in most cases, this can be a useful effect if we need to start closing out the game. But we also have some draw effects that don't rely on our creatures dealing combat damage. Frantic Search will have us draw 2, then discard 2, but will untap the 3 lands we used to cast it, becoming a free spell to cast. Fibblethip the Lost will draw us a card on entering the battlefield, and Shipwreck Looter will have us draw and discard, but only if we've attacked this turn. These are great cards to get bounced with our commander's ability, as they are cheap to recast, and in the case of Shipwreck Looter, it can fuel its own raid ability by being the creature that attacked this turn. Charter Course for 2 mana has us draw 2 cards, only having to discard a card if we haven't attacked with a creature this turn. And Visions from Beyond, when combined with our main plan of milling our opponents, which we will discuss in depth later, can become a 1 mana for 3 cards. A no blue deck would turn down the banned almost everywhere Ancestral Recall this can become. One last draw effect comes in the form of the new mono blue class card from Forgotten Realms in Wizard's class. For 1 mana, this enchantment simply grants us no maximum hand size, but once it's on the battlefield we can pay 2 and a blue to get to level 2 and draw 2 cards. And its third ability, for an additional 4 and a blue, will have us put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control each time we draw a card. Easily being able to make a single creature, likely our commander, huge, and be an option to close the game as well if we can pull it off. And like our ramp, we have some lands that can help our draw if we need it, Blighted Cataract and Memorial to Glory can both sacrifice to draw 2 cards, neither at an ideal rate but good cards to have if needed. And War Room only lets us draw 1 card, but is a cheaper rate and it sticks around to be used for mana if needed in future turns. But with all those out the way, let's move on to our game plan. We have already talked about how we want to keep returning creatures to our hand, but swinging with only a few low powered creatures isn't going to make our opponents block us most of the time, so we need to make our creatures a bit more threatening. And for this, we have some equipment we can suit them up with. Scytheclaw and Quietus Spike present the same threat to an opponent. If our creature equipped with either of these gets through, they will lose half their life rounded up. While our main game plan is to reduce their deck size rather than their life totals, other players are likely going to be damaging our opponents to try and win, so aiming this at the right player will always guarantee the creature equipped will return to our hand. Sword of Body and Mind and Trepanation Blade both fit in better with our main game plan of milling our opponents out. Sword of Body and Mind provides our creatures a nice buff of +2 and gives protection from green and blue, probably the 2 most popular colours, but on dealing combat damage will mill that player for 10 cards and give us a 2/2 wolf to help protect ourselves. And Trepanation Blade works slightly differently. The effect isn't exactly mill, but works very similarly, having them reveal cards from their library until they reveal a land card. All the cards then go into the graveyard, and our equipped creature gets a power boost equal to the number of cards revealed. And Bone Horde buffs a creature for each creature in all graveyards. If we've been able to get some of our big mill effects off, this could be a large power boost. And while we mostly want our creatures blocked, a Rogue's Passage in our mana base means that if we want to get through to an opponent, we can. And to make the choice of blocking or not blocking our creatures harder, we have some cards that our opponents will not want to block. Suppressant Air and Storm Surge Kraken are 2 creatures that draw us cards each time they are blocked. Storm Surge Kraken would be a 7/7 creature if our commander is out, meaning it would likely survive a combat, but Suppressant Air will need to be returned to hand, being only a 1/1, but only 2 mana to recast makes this a 2 mana draw 3 cards. And similarly, Infiltration Lens is an equipment that will have any creature equipped with it draw us 2 cards whenever it becomes blocked. Dead Iron Sledge is equipment that if our creature becomes blocked will attempt to destroy both our creature and anything blocking it. With our command out, we will have this trigger and our commander's return to hand trigger. We will choose to resolve our commander's trigger first, returning our creature to hand. And when the sledge trigger resolves, our creature is no longer there to destroy, but our opponent's will be. Tolarian Entrancer does an even better job. Whenever a creature blocks it, we gain control of it at the end of combat. And with Tolarian Entrancer back in hand, we can recast it and keep repeating this. And lastly, Cunning Evasion doesn't do anything nasty, but is a second copy of our commander in enchantment form. We have a selection of creatures that we really want to keep getting their enter the battlefield effects, but to understand why, we need to take a look at how we're planning to win. Milling our opponents out is how we are planning to win with this deck, and we have a mix of big and small effects that can help us achieve this. Let's start with some enchantments that offer a repeatable mill. Court of Cunning will introduce the monarchy into the game, meaning that on the monarch's end step they will draw an additional card. But if a creature deals combat damage to the monarch, that creature's controller gains control of the monarchy. This is going to help provide another reason that players may want to block our creatures. But the main reason for the court is that on our upkeep, we can have any number of players mill 2 cards, but if we've held the monarchy until our upkeep, each of those players mills 10 cards instead. Psychic Corrosion and Mystic Redaction each have a trigger to mill each opponent for 2 cards. Psychic Corrosion does this whenever we draw a card, and Mystic Redaction does this whenever we discard a card. Sphinx's Tutelage is similar to Psychic Corrosion, triggering each time we draw a card, but only triggers on a single opponent. But if those cards are 2 non-land cards that share a colour, we repeat this process. This is an effect that we want to target against another monocoloured deck, or on a deck that we know relies on one colour more than the others. And Teferi's Tutelage just mills an opponent for 2 cards each time we draw a card, and draws a card on entering the battlefield to get the ball rolling. Next, we have some creatures that will mill our opponents. Ruin Crab will mill each opponent for 3 cards, each time a land enters the battlefield under our control. Overwhelmed Apprentice is a 1 mana creature that mills our opponents for 2 when it enters. Suited up with some equipment and force an opponent to block to keep recasting it. Manic Scribe will mill each opponent for 3 on entering the battlefield, but if we have 4 different card types in our graveyard, its second ability will turn on, having each opponent mill 3 cards on each of their upkeeps. And Sphinx Mindbreaker is one of our most expensive creatures, costing 7 mana, but mills each opponent for 10 cards, and is a large 6/6 flying body that will force an opponent into blocking it or they will lose from a big flyer in the air. Fleet Swallower doesn't mill on entering the battlefield, but on attack will mill half a player's library, quickly getting through a player's deck, and another 6/6 body like our Sphinx that should live through a good number of combats. But some of our most impactful mill effects come on our instants and sorceries. Maddening Cacophony is a card we will always want to cast while paying its kicker cost. This card for 4 and 2 blue will mill each opponent for half their library. This cast early gets us a good head start on milling our opponents out. Fractured Sanity is a cheaper but less powerful effect, for 3 blue mana milling our opponents for 14 cards. And Tasha's Hideous Laughter doesn't mill our opponents, but has them exile cards from their libraries until they exile 20 or more mana's worth of cards. Against the right deck, like an Elf Ball deck or a Cheerios deck, this could remove a large number of cards, and with them in exile, makes them much harder to get back. Traumatize will mill half a single player's library, and while we want our effects to target all players if possible, half a library is powerful enough of an effect that just hitting one player is enough. Finally, Startled Awake will only mill a single opponent for 13 cards, but can return itself to the battlefield as a creature. This new 1/1 creature has Skulk, meaning it is very hard to block, and when it deals combat damage to an opponent, returns itself to our hand to be recast as the sorcery. Our commander means that blocked or unblocked, we will get this card back to our hand. So we can see that our instants and sorceries are our more powerful effects, but it would be better if we could use them multiple times, so creatures that can return our used instants and sorceries back to hand are very useful in this deck. Archaeomancer, Salvager of Secrets, Shipwrecked Dowser, and Scholar of the Ages are all creatures that on entering the battlefield return an instant or sorcery to our hand. Aberrant Mind Sorcerer has us roll a d20 on entering the battlefield, getting an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand only if we roll a 10 or higher. All these creatures can help us cast our mill cards more than once. Equipping these creatures with some of our equipment will force an opponent to block and allow us to keep recasting them to get our mill cards back. And since most of these creatures are wizards, we have a Riptide Laboratory in our mana base just in case we want to return one to hand without having to rely on an opponent blocking us. We also have some other ways to return our mill cards to hand. Call to Mind and Flood of Recollection will get us back our more impactful instant and sorceries to our hand. A Mystic Sanctuary is a land that as long as we control 3 other islands when it enters will do the same. Lastly, let's look at our removal. Pongify, Rapid Hybridization, and Reality Shift are our blue go-to creature removal spells, swapping a problematic creature for a 3/3 token or a manifested card off our opponent's library. Ravenform and Resculpt also hit artifacts, pairing nicely with the Liquid Metal Torque we mentioned earlier. Expel from Araska will bounce any non-land permanent back to its owner's hand, but if we have the City's Blessing after getting 10 permanents on the battlefield, we will put it on top of its owner's library instead, the perfect place to get milled away from. Memory Lapse is a counterspell that also puts the card it counters on top of its owner's library to be milled. And with 2 board wipes, Aetherize returns all attacking creatures to their owner's hands, and Aetherspell forces their opponents to choose if they want to move their attacking creatures to the bottom or the top of their library. There we have it, a Grazilaxx Illithid Scholar deck built around bouncing our creatures and milling our opponents. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like as it really does help me out. And why not subscribe to the channel to keep up to date when a new deck comes out. And as always, thank you for listening and goodbye for now.